Stand now.
Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Thank you very much. May I call Graham Ward?
Yes.
Repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You can sit down.
Good morning, Mr. Ward. My name is Jason Beer, and as you know, I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you tell us your full name, please?
Graham Ward.
Thank you very much.
Before you continue, Mr. Beer, I think it's appropriate to give Mr. Ward a direction about self-incrimination. So I'll do that now.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Mr. Ward, under our law, a witness at a public inquiry has the right to decline to answer a question put to him by counsel to the inquiry, by any recognized legal representative, or by me, if there is a risk that the answer to that question would incriminate the witness. In shorthand, this legal principle is known as the privilege against self-incrimination. I consider that fairness demands that I remind you of that principle before you give your evidence. If at any stage you wish to rely upon the privilege, it is for you to make it clear to me that in respect of any question put to you, it is your wish to rely upon the privilege against self-incrimination. If, therefore, any questions are put to you by any of the lawyers who ask you questions, or by me, which you do not wish to answer, you must tell me immediately after any such question is raised. At that point, I will consider your objection to answering the question and thereafter rule upon whether your objection should be upheld. I understand that you're represented by a solicitor here at the inquiry today. No doubt if the issue relating to self-incrimination arises, that solicitor will assist you, and if at any stage during the questioning you wish to consult your solicitor about the privilege, you must tell me so that I can consider whether that is appropriate. Do you understand what I've just said to you, Mr. Ward?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Then over to you, Mr. Beer.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Ward, you've helpfully made a witness statement to us in the inquiry. It's a 35-page witness statement, excluding its appendices. Can we turn that up, please? It's WITN 1059-0100. It should be at tab A1 in the bundle in front of you as well. Now, I think there's an amendment that you would like to make to it, to paragraph 4B, which is on page 2.
That's correct.
And, 4D on page 2, right at the
4D.
bottom.
Yeah.
When it says in around 1995, I joined the Post Office investigation team, do you wish to amend that to in around 1995?
Yeah, it says around 1997, but it's actually 1995, yeah.
Okay, so it should read in 1995.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And then if you turn to the last page, please, which is page 35, is that your signature?
It is, yes.
And with the amendment that we've just made, are the contents of the witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you very much. You can put that to one side, thank you. And that can come down. Now, I think you joined the Post Office in 1984 as a counter clerk, is that right?
That's correct.
And you left in May 2016 as mail conformance manager within the National Network Conformance Team, is that right?
That's correct.
If I can go at a canter first through your various positions,
Yeah.
and then come back and explore each of them in a little more detail.
Yeah.
So I think 1984 to 1992, you were a counter clerk at branches in South London, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
In 1992, you became an assistant area manager in the London South West District.
That's correct.
In 1993, you became an auditor in the South East Regional Audit Team, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
In 1995, as you've just told us, you joined the Post Office Investigation Team, first as an analyst and then as an investigation manager.
That's correct.
Albeit, as I think you're going to tell us, that was just a job retitling exercise,
Yeah.
and the substance of the job remained the same.
Essentially, yeah.
Thank you. 2001, you became the Policy and Standards Manager within the security team, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
In 2002, you became the Assistant Casework Manager
Yep.
in the security team.
That's correct.
In 2007, you became the Casework Manager in the security team.
That's correct.
In 2012, you moved to work on a project in information security.
Yes, that's correct.
And in 2013, you became the Mail Conformance Manager,
Yeah, that's correct.
and you left in May 2016.
Exactly, yeah.
So overall, it's plain, would you agree, that you had a long career in the post office?
Yes, I did, yeah.
That included working in the investigation team, the security team,
Yeah.
for a long period of time.
Indeed, yeah.
Prior to the rollout of the Horizon system and through the rollout of the Horizon system.
Yes,
And you held, would you agree, significant roles so far as the inquiries investigation is concerned, as an investigation manager, assistant casework manager, and casework manager.
yes,
And I think we're going to hear that you were the casework manager in relation to the investigations of Noel Huey Thomas, yes?
yes,
You were a financial investigator in the proceedings against Julian Wilson,
correct.
and you were involved in a capacity in the civil claim concerning Lee Castleton.
Correct, yeah.
Can we go back and look at some of those jobs in a little more detail, starting with when you became an auditor in 1993 in the South East Regional Audit Team. You tell us that that involved auditing branch accounts and undertaking various compliance tests. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Did you have any professional qualifications when you became an auditor?
No, I didn't, no.
Did you receive any in-house training in order to perform the role of auditor?
Yes, it was on the job training, yeah.
What training did you receive when you became an auditor?
So, as an auditor, it was a case of auditing accounts of whichever branches we were going into, which involved counting cash, stock, and doing performance of all the various vouchers that were on hand. So, essentially, you were doing the same sort of job as you were as a counter clerk. So, it was just more of the same, auditing the entire branch.
To some people's mind, an auditor may, or the title auditor may convey a certain image. Would a fairer description of what you were in fact doing be a stock taking?
Well, we were counting all the cash, all the stock, all the vouchers that were on hand, and coordinating that into the office balance. So, yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah.
Now, in 1995, as you've told us, you joined the Post Office Investigation Team, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And the investigation team was part of the security team.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
You were initially an investigation analyst, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And you were line managed by a manager, is that right?
That was right, yeah.
And you tell us that you attended 2 weeks of formal training provided by something you describe as the Royal Mail Training Team.
Yeah,
And was that assessed training?
there was an assessment at the end of the course, yeah. It was a 2-week training course, and you had to pass the assessment to sort of pass out, as it were.
Did that training involve any external trainers?
No, they were in-house trainers.
And so there were no, for example, police officers or
No.
other people involved in the law enforcement
No.
business there?
No.
Did it involve any training delivered by external lawyers?
No.
Did it involve any training delivered by lawyers at all?
I don't remember any lawyers during that 2-week session coming to the course, but there may have been, but I don't recall.
In a subsequent part of your statement, you recall there being a training session about disclosure. Was that within the 2-week course, or was that a separate course?
I believe that was probably a separate. I don't recall it during that 2 weeks, but it was a long time ago.
Just jumping ahead a bit, you tell us that there was a job re-evaluation exercise. Is that right?
Yeah.
And when was that?
I think it would probably been about a year or so into the role. So I joined in '95 as an investigation analyst, and the job essentially was to support the investigation manager putting cases together. The evaluation sort of basically you became an investigation manager, so we were just leading investigations at that point instead of supporting.
And so after that time, you were the first officer,
Yeah,
as it were, in
Yeah,
any
yeah.
investigation.
absolutely, yeah.
Did any training or anything else occur at that time, or was it just a retitling of your...
Just a retitling, there was no other training.
And do you know what the job re-evaluation exercise consisted of?
No, I've no idea. It was just retitled, and yeah, we were told that you're going to lead investigations.
Going back then to when you were the investigation analyst, in addition to the 2 weeks of training, was there a period of mentoring?
Yeah.
And who was that by, and how long did it last for?
So I was working to an investigation manager called Aileen Sobel, so she would have done the mentoring. There was another investigation manager at the time, Ray Pratt, who was there to mentor as well, and we would essentially be mentored by, or I would be essentially mentored by either of them. It was ongoing.
Okay, and so that's sort of on-the-job
Yeah.
training, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You tell us in your statement that as an investigator, both as an analyst and then an investigation manager, you were required to apply legislation, including the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and the Criminal Procedure and Investigations Act.
Yeah.
Were you trained on the requirements of each of those pieces of legislation in the 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was covered in those 2 weeks, yeah.
And what about the codes of practice issued under each of those pieces of legislation?
Such a long time ago, I can't recall, to be honest, but we had the codes of practice books within our tackle kit, so you'd have a kit that you would carry around with you, so the codes of practice were there.
In hard copy, you carry them around?
Yeah, in hard copy, yeah.
And you tell us in your witness statement that there was an intranet site as well.
Yeah, there was an intranet site, yeah.
Were the acts and the codes issued under them on the intranet site?
I can't recall.
Did you, whichever in hard copy or in electronic form, often have recourse to what the relevant legislation or the code provided?
Not that I can recall, no.
What was the purpose of carrying them around?
Well, just in case you needed to refer to them.
And in your years, and I suppose we're looking now between 1995 and 2001,
Yeah.
when you became the policy and standards manager.
Yeah.
In those 6 years, there wasn't the occasion didn't arise that you ever needed to consult them?
Not really, no.
In relation to your training, either the 2 weeks at the beginning or the on-the-job training, did that cover disclosure duties?
Not that I can recall. I do remember at some point there would have been some sort of disclosure training, but I can't recall the details now, I'm afraid.
Asking you now, what would you say is the duty that's owed by an investigator in relation to disclosure?
Anything that undermines the prosecution or supports the defence,
And what must happen to such material?
it needs to be disclosed within your case file.
And when you say it needs to be disclosed in the case file, is that in the file that's going to go up to the lawyer?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. With various appendices to each case file. So, yes, you would disclose whatever within that.
And when you were constructing a case file, and there was material that undermined the proposed prosecution case or supported that of the suspect, how was that material provided to the lawyer?
I didn't have that many cases that went to prosecution.
In this
myself.
6-year period?
Yeah. There weren't that many. If there was material that needed to be provided, it would have been in hard copy in the case file.
I mean, I deliberately asked an open question there because one way of providing disclosure to a lawyer and then to a defendant is to list it.
Yeah.
To say there's
Yeah,
document A, document B, document
it would be
C.
on a schedule within the appendice.
Another way to provide disclosure is to provide the documents to the lawyer in a big pack.
Yeah.
Which of those methods was used in your branch of the post office?
There would have been a schedule of the documents if there was anything, but I don't recall ever having anything that would have undermined the supported the defence, sorry.
Again, this is in this 6-year period,
Yeah.
95 to 2001.
Most of the cases I dealt with were pre-Horizon, so it was manual balancing within the branches for the most part, and I don't recall having any cases at all that involved Horizon.
I'm going to come on to that in a moment because your time in investigation straddled the introduction of Horizon.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
But just looking at it generally at the moment, you're saying in this 6-year period, you don't recall ever coming across a document that undermined the prosecution case or helped the defendant?
Not that I can recall, no.
The only material that you found proved guilt?
Yeah, from what I can recall, yeah. I mean, it's such a long time ago, but yeah, I don't recall anything like that.
What about your training on pursuing reasonable lines of inquiry? Can you recall what that was?
No, I mean, the training was to pursue all reasonable lines of inquiry. I mean, to do a thorough investigation, and that's what we tried to do.
And what would you understand that to mean, a thorough investigation?
Well, yeah, it's a difficult one.
Would it include actively looking for material that
Yeah.
might help the suspect?
Yeah, I guess it would, yes, but
Would you
It's-
guess or you know?
yeah, I'm not guessing. It's been such a long time since I've actually conducted an investigation. You know, if I could refer it to a specific type of inquiry, it might be easier for me to tell you what I would be looking for.
Do you remember the introduction of the Horizon system?
Yeah, vaguely. I think it was around 99, 2000-ish.
That's right.
Yeah.
Did you receive any training when it was introduced as to the operation of the Horizon system?
Not that I can recall. I think we went on a very brief kind of introduction, but it wasn't thorough training on everything, no.
And you say you think you went on a very brief introduction. Was that sort of in a branch, in an office
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
to see how the counter worked?
Yeah, exactly that, yeah. I mean, the operation of the cash accounts and the balancing essentially was the same, but on a computer. So, yeah, the training wasn't sort of thorough. It was a brief overview, as you say.
And Was that sort of a half day, a day, or longer?
Probably a half day, I would say, but I genuinely can't remember.
Okay. Did you get any training at that time when Horizon was being introduced in the types of data that it produced that might be relevant to your role as an investigator?
Not that I can recall, no.
Can you recall any discussion within the investigation team? Look, we're now going over to a computer-based accounting system. This is going to fundamentally alter the way that we obtain data in order to investigate and perhaps prosecute sub-postmasters. We need to know what this computer system, not in the branch, not what the keypad and the monitor looks like, but the back office functions. What data it produces, where they're stored, what they mean, how we interpret them. Was there anything like that?
I genuinely can't remember. I'm sure there must have been some kind of a guide as to the sort of data that could be obtained from Fujitsu, but I really don't remember, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Were you as an investigator trained in how to analyse the data produced by Horizon?
Not that I can recall, no.
Whose function was it when Horizon was introduced, bearing in mind that we're, in your case as an investigator, talking about a sort of a 1 or 2 year period, either 2000 or 2001 essentially. Whose function was it to analyse the data that Horizon produced?
The investigator?
Do you know whether investigators were taught to look for any errors made by the system, by the Horizon system?
Not that I can recall, no.
Was the potential for the system to make errors something that was identified when it was introduced to you as an investigator?
No, it wasn't, no.
In what way, if any, did the investigation team's investigation processes and practices change after the introduction of Horizon?
I don't think we changed anything from what I can recall. The majority of the cases that were being dealt with at that time, when, early 2000, were pension allowance fraud. Whether it was overclaims or whether it was stolen pension books, it was a problem right across the country, and London was a particular hotspot where I was working. So the Horizon data was actually very useful for that because it provided us with more information than we used to get from manual balancing. So Horizon transaction logs would identify a user ID who processed the transaction and a time, which was very helpful. In terms of, as I say, other changes, I can't recall, to be honest.
That species of investigation is not something that the inquiry is looking at, as you know.
Yeah.
But that species of investigation is something that relied on the reliability of the Horizon data too. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Were you or members of the investigation team around you informed of issues or problems that had arisen in the course of the testing, acceptance phase, and then the rollout of Horizon?
No.
Were you told about any measures that had been put in place to monitor the continuation of such errors and the rectification of them?
Not that I can recall, no.
You told us that you don't recall dealing with a case involving Horizon. Is that right?
Yeah, not that I can recall, no. I may well have done, but I can't remember.
And when you say that, do you mean involving a sub-postmaster?
Yeah, sub-postmaster. I dealt with
What about the pension
pension
book fraud?
Yeah,
You must have been dealing with those.
yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And again, as we've said, that would, the investigation of that would involve consideration of data produced by Horizon.
Yes, it would, yeah.
And were you at this stage told of any bugs, errors or defects in Horizon that might affect the reliability of the data that it produced?
No, we weren't.
For that species of investigation, was there a method by which the investigation team obtained assurance as to the reliability of the data that the computer was producing?
I can't remember. I really can't. It's that far back.
We're going to go on later and talk about when you became the assistant casework manager
Yeah.
and then the casework manager, about getting ARQ data
Yeah.
and getting witness statements from Fujitsu.
Yeah.
Back in 99, 2000 and 2001, when you were an investigator,
Yeah.
was there that facility available then?
Yeah, I genuinely cannot remember that far back.
Were there team meetings amongst the investigators?
Yeah, we would have team meetings.
Where were you based?
I was based in Croydon, so I was part of the South East Regional team.
And were all of the investigators within that regional team based there?
No, they were dotted around. There was, I think our regional office at that point was down in Tunbridge Wells, and there were investigators within the South East Regional team based in Twickenham as well. I can't remember it anywhere else. There may have been other people located. I mean, investigators were located, all over.
I'll look at it the other way round then. What method was adopted, if any, for the sharing of information amongst investigators about issues that had arisen in the course of their investigations that might be relevant to other investigators?
Well, team meetings they weren't scheduled all the time. I mean, we'd have probably monthly meetings, maybe bi-monthly.
And you said they weren't scheduled.
No.
So does that mean they were arranged ad hoc?
Probably, yeah.
What method, if any, then, was there for sharing information about relevant issues,
circulars.
cross-cutting issues that applied or might apply across investigations?
By way of circular, I think that would come from one of the managers in the team, probably the policy and standards manager. If there were particular issues that were relevant for everybody that needed to know about, a circular would be drafted up and sent out to everybody.
And would that be about law and policy and practice?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about issues, concerns or facts. I've found this in my investigation. When you try and get a witness statement out of Fujitsu, it's a bit difficult to get one, or you have to run around a bit, or there's not a clear process, or I found that this kind of data is not sufficient for the conduct of my investigation. You want to ask them for this, or this person at Fujitsu is really helpful, or get somebody else in post office involved further up the chain. They might help you to get this data. That kind of thing. Did that occur?
I couldn't give you a specific example, but I'm sure it would have happened. Yeah.
Who was your line manager at this time? So 99, 2000, 2001.
As an investigator, my line manager was either Aileen Sobel until she left. I can't remember when she left, and then Ray Pratt took over.
And what form of management supervision did they take in relation to you?
So we would have one-to-ones, and working in the same office, we would obviously chat regularly. But yeah, one-to-ones would be the formal supervision, and they would be monthly.
You moved into the role of assistant casework manager in 2002.
That's correct, yeah.
Can you describe what the function of the assistant casework manager was?
From what I can recall, essentially it was to support the casework manager, and the casework manager was responsible for movement of case files, provision of management information to senior lead team on cases, and we were, from what I can recall at that point, we were kind of a focal point or a central point for the team in terms of movement of case files and so on.
So just tell us what the purpose of the role was, of casework management.
So the purpose of casework management, as I recall, would be to monitor the progress of case files from raising a case. So you would receive, we used to have a spreadsheet that we ran for casework. We also had a spreadsheet for incidents that were reported to us across the network in the South East region. And we would just, if there were a series of losses at a particular Crown office, we would put that together and consider raising a case. Cash centres would be similar. If there were a pattern of losses, we would raise a case. For audit losses, pension allowance fraud, as we've mentioned, was our main source of investigation at that point. I think pensions went onto card account, I think it was around 2003, so that sort of stopped at that point.
So first of all, was it a national function?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And so did it apply to cases involving post offices in England and Wales?
Yes, it did, yeah.
Did it involve any of the devolved administrations, Scotland or Northern Ireland?
They were very much independent, so I can't remember whether we recorded the details of those cases or not.
And I got a sense, please correct me if this is wrong, that there were essentially two parts of it. One is the management of cases that were being investigated, and the second was analysis of data to see whether an incident or an issue should be investigated.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And did your role involve both of those things?
From what I can recall, yes.
And what did the management of the existing cases consist of? What management of a case was needed?
So when a case was raised, it would go to the investigator, and the investigator would carry out whatever investigations they deemed appropriate, which may involve interviewing, PACE interviews, etc. If that happened, reports would be written, tape summaries would be produced, and the case would then be sent to the casework manager.
And just, sorry, at that stage, stopping you there,
Yeah.
did the casework manager, whether the senior person or the assistant, you, have any role to perform before the file was received in the office?
Not that I can recall, no.
Okay, so you weren't overseeing, managing or supervising the conduct of the investigation?
No, that would be dealt with. I mean, the investigator was in charge of the conduct of the investigation, and their team leader would supervise.
So
Casework was monitoring.
I'm so sorry, I spoke over you.
Sorry.
Management and oversight of the investigation was conducted out of the Croydon office, is that right?
Yeah.
At a local level?
Yes.
So you were saying then the file came in, and was that essentially the trigger for involvement of the casework managers?
Exactly, yeah. And we would record all the details on the spreadsheet that we had at the time.
And what was the spreadsheet for, and what were the details?
So the details would be date the case was raised, branch involved, branch code, whether a PACE interview had happened or not.
And why were you recording that data, those data?
For information, so that it was provided upwards, so they could monitor the number of cases that were on hand, the number of interviews that were being conducted, and the progress of the case when it was passed through to the legal team.
And why was it necessary to have that information?
I don't know really. I think that was just the process that we followed.
Okay. So you recorded that information. What else, if anything, did you do with the casework file?
So the casework manager would just put a short memo in the file, just summarising that here's a case relating to pension allowance fraud. PACE interviews have been conducted, and the case is passed through to the criminal law team for their review as to whether, the case should proceed to prosecution or not.
And so the casework management team was responsible physically for receiving the file,
Yeah.
and physically for passing it on to the lawyers.
Exactly, yeah.
Was any compliance check undertaken?
I can't remember when compliance came in.
There was a time.
There was a time when compliance was performed, yeah, on cases.
And what did compliance consist of?
So that was all about the structure of the case file and the uniformity of the case file, and reference to making sure that within the body of the report, if there was reference to a particular exhibit, it would be included in the right appendices envelope, and paginated, red label. It was about consistency and uniformity. And
Was it about quality?
it was to drive up the standard of the case file to ensure a consistency and an accuracy in the way they were being presented. In terms of the
Sorry to interrupt you. The things you've listed may sound like presentational issues,
Yeah.
about the right stickers and the way it's set out. What about the quality of the investigation? Was that addressed?
Yeah, it's a long time ago to remember, to be honest, but there would be, in terms of the format of the report, the structure of the report, reference to admissions made and or not, in terms of just trying to think, procedural failings, that type of thing, then we would be wanting to check that had all been covered. I can't remember whether that was actually formally part of the compliance or not. So, yeah, I can't recall.
If you had to describe the nature of the exercise that you undertook as an assistant casework manager and then the casework manager, would you say it was more to do with procedure and process than it was to do with substance and quality of investigations?
I think that's fair, yeah.
So would you, for example, read the investigation report, the witness statements, look at any exhibits and think, they haven't pursued this line of inquiry?
No, I think that...
Send it back?
No, I don't recall going into that level of detail. That would be more for the team leader to look at, I would have thought.
And by team leader, you mean back out on the areas?
Yeah. I mean, if there was anything glaringly obvious within the case file that had been missed, if there was reference to, a witness statement and there was no witness statement within the file, then that would be highlighted. But
that's, again, a bit more process rather than substance, though, isn't it? If there's a missing document.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Now, I think you, when you became casework manager, you had line management responsibility for 4 or 5 administrative support staff within casework management. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And what did they do?
So there were various areas. When I became casework manager, I think it was around 2004.
Yes.
That was when I think there was a Horizon upgrade at that point, because the post office card account came in. So we had a banking side to the team as well. So with casework, we had a support staff who covered, we had somebody who dealt with stationery and stores for the whole team. So that was one role. We had a support member of staff who used to monitor losses and issues at cash centres. We had somebody who covered the directly managed branches. that they had a responsibility to report all losses to us, just Crown offices. And we had a member of staff dealing with the banking side. I think the system that they had access to, from memory, I think it was called TES, which was Transaction Inquiry Service, which was something that you could access to obtain details of all the banking transactions that had happened. And the team were responsible for DPA requests that would come in from external agencies asking for information. I mean, again, I can't remember the full details, but that was another area. Yeah, I think, and we had a couple of managers come in at the time as well, who were sort of supervising the different sort of the different postal officers or support staff that we had.
And who were they?
So Jason Collins, and I think from memory he dealt with the casework side of it as well, and Natasha Bernard, and she dealt with the banking side.
You tell us about this in your witness statement. You say that due to the high volume of work within the casework team,
Yeah,
and then following another team restructure, you were promoted to the role of casework and banking fraud team leader,
yeah,
which was essentially a similar role to that of the casework manager, but brought into the team two other managers, the two people you've just mentioned, and you managed both of them too. So this is still working as casework manager, essentially in Croydon.
yeah.
You took over two other managers, and your job was retitled again.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I line managed Jason and Natasha, and they line managed the support staff. So it took away that element from me.
One of the things that you tell us in your witness statement was your responsibility was the provision of performance statistics to senior management.
That's correct, yeah.
What were the statistics that you supplied to senior management?
So it would be the losses, the total value of losses for cases under investigation, the number of PACE interviews, the number of cases where charges have been preferred, summonses issued.
Convictions?
Yeah, convictions, yeah. Can't remember the rest, to be honest, but...
Money recovered?
Yeah, I mean, POCA started around 2003, 4, I think.
The Act was 2002.
Yeah, the Act
brought into
was
effect in
2002.
3.
Yeah, but we didn't get financial investigators straight away, I don't think. I think they came in around 2004-ish. I'm not 100% clear, but...
Was there no recovery before POCA came into force?
Well, realistically, no. I mean, in terms of benefit fraud and the pension frauds that I've spoken about, the loss wasn't the post offices. That would be the DWP as it was, or I think it was DWP then, benefit agency. So, that wasn't our losses. I think prior to POCA, compensation civilly would have been pursued, but that wouldn't have been our team dealing with that. That would have been the civil litigation team.
What was the purpose of the provision of these performance statistics to senior management?
I presume to justify our existence, to demonstrate that, the role that we were performing.
Which senior management were provided with the statistics?
That would have been the head of the security team, whoever that was at the time.
You tell us in your witness statement that your line managers during this period, when you were the casework manager under either of or both of the titles, were Tony Utting and then David Pardo.
That's correct, yeah.
And were they located in the Croydon office?
No, Tony Utting was. Dave Pardo, I'm not sure where he was based. It was somewhere up north. I think it might have been St Helens, but I can't be 100% sure there.
How did they manage you?
So with Tony, he being based in Croydon, he was on hand, and Dave Pardo. He would come down to London quite often to, undertake one-to-ones. But I would say I was well supported by both in my role.
Going back to the provision of performance statistics, to your knowledge, were any members of your team or you paid bonuses or performance-related pay in this period?
And this is going back to 2004-07?
Yes. Yeah, so when you were the casework manager and then the same job under the different title until 2007.
I think there might have been targets for recovery when proceeds of crime first came in, but I can't remember. It would have been quite a low percentage. I was aware when I was, later on, maybe you'll come on to that, I don't know, but quite getting on for about 2013, 2012, just before I left the team. There was definitely objectives then. Whether they were there in 2004-07, I can't be 100% sure, but they may well have been.
And were they for the financial investigators, those targets?
I think they were, no, I think they were...
Or did they trickle through to people on the casework management team?
It would be, no, it was a team objective. So, if there was bonuses, it would have applied to the whole team.
And so, and when you say the whole team, do you mean the security team?
Yeah, exactly. There weren't individual targets or anything like that.
Right.
So as I say, I'm not 100% sure when bonuses came in.
And can you recall what they were tied to, what they were linked to? For the security team as a whole, what was the measure or the metric that meant that a bonus was achieved or not achieved or partially achieved?
Just in terms of loss and recovery?
Yes. Was that the only metric?
There were lots of other metrics in terms of bonus. That would just be one element. But as I say, I'm very vague on that, got to be honest.
Were any of the metrics, to your knowledge, tied to the number of convictions obtained?
No, they weren't, no.
Was recovering money itself tied to, or was a condition precedent to obtaining recovery, getting a conviction?
Well, POCA and recovery from POCA was obviously post-conviction, but it didn't influence the way we dealt with financial investigations.
And how do you know that?
Well, I can only speak for myself. If you're conducting a financial investigation, you do the investigation thoroughly, and if there are no assets, there won't be a recovery. So there's nothing you can do to influence that.
One of the other functions, I think, as a casework manager, was acting as a single point of contact for requesting Horizon data from Fujitsu via the ARQ, Audit Record Query Process. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Did you perform that function when you were the assistant case work manager?
Again, it's such a long time ago, I can't recall, but quite likely, yes.
Okay, moving on, we're going to come back to what ARQ requests consisted of and how they were processed in a moment. So in 2007, you moved into the role of an accredited financial investigator, is that right?
Yeah.
An AFI?
That's correct.
And was that in the financial investigation unit?
It was, yeah.
And where was the FIU?
So that was based at Croydon as well. They had a separate office. I can't remember if we were on the same floor or not, but yeah, we were in the Croydon office, yeah.
You tell us that involved seeking recovery of money through the application of the Proceeds of Crime Act, yes?
That's correct, yeah.
That's in convicted cases, is that right?
That's correct.
And making applications at the Crown Court for production, restraint and confiscation orders.
That's correct, yeah.
You tell us that your previous experience as an auditor, investigator and casework manager provided you with a good background and understanding of financial investigation work.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
By this time, 2007, were you aware of any bugs, errors or defects in the Horizon system that could affect the reliability of the data that you were working with?
No.
I think you were line managed by Jed Harbinson, is that right?
That's correct.
And then Paul Southern after Mr. Harbinson left.
That's correct.
Was there a floor below which financial investigations were not pursued? A lower bound figure?
Yeah, I can't remember what the value was. I think it started off at £10,000 loss. But I might be wrong about that. I know it went up to around 20,000 because of the there was a high volume of cases. So I think the trigger was around 20,000.
When the figure went up from 10 to 20 and then 20 to another figure, was the reason for that the volume of work?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So this was meant as a control measure, is that right?
Exactly, yeah.
To regulate the number of investigations being undertaken?
Yeah, from a financial investigation perspective, yeah.
Does it follow that as the figures progressively went up, 10 to 20, and then 20 to another figure, which you can't now remember?
I'm not sure it went up above 20.
Okay. That signalled that there was an increase in work, an increase in, if you hadn't changed the figures, there would have been an increase in work,
Yeah.
an increase in the volume of convicted people.
Yeah, I'm not sure the volume of convicted cases went up that much, to be honest, but we would...
What led to the increase in volume of work then?
Well, there were... Cases were raised based on loss, so they would be referred to us for financial investigation, which might involve some intelligence work just to see what assets were there that didn't proceed to a prosecution, and obviously the case would then be closed from our perspective. So, yeah, I don't recall the number of convictions going up significantly.
Okay.
We'd always had quite a reasonable...
But the number of cases required to be investigated went up.
Yeah.
Did anyone ask why?
No, not that I can recall, no.
Was there anything obvious that accounted for the number of cases that required investigating going up?
No, not that I can recall, no.
Was this just a sort of mystery then? Why is the number of cases requiring investigation involving losses in branches going up?
I don't know that the cases were going up, to be honest.
You told us that they had to up the floor from 10 to 20,000 pounds as a control measure.
Yeah.
Because the number of workload was increasing, the number of investigations were increasing. So I think it must follow that the number of investigations must have been increasing, otherwise they wouldn't have had to have introduced the control measure.
I think the financial investigators were flooded with cases from the outset. I mean, we didn't have financial investigations pre-2003, whenever it was. So I don't know that they'd gone up significantly. So I don't know that that's true, because there were always a high volume of cases within the team.
And so there was a high volume from the start,
Yeah.
which was always too much. And that's why they had to increase the floor from 10 to 20,000 pounds.
Yeah, I would say that's fair, yeah.
Rather than an increase in the number of cases requiring to be investigated from the start of financial investigations occurring?
Well, as I say, there were always a high volume of cases for financial investigators to look at right from the outset. Not all of them went to conviction, though.
And when you say there were always a high volume of cases, does that mean that there was a surprisingly high number of cases that required to be investigated, or there weren't enough investigators, or both?
I don't think it was any surprise that there were a high number of cases to be investigated, because there always were high volumes of cases. And that was pre-Horizon and after Horizon. And obviously the number of investigators dropped. There were numerous reviews from my time in the team, efficiencies where investigators were lost. So, yeah. But from memory, there was always a high volume of cases to be dealt with.
In 2012, you moved into the information security team.
Yeah, I was seconded onto a project.
And what was the project about?
It was PCCI.
What's that
it's
about?
Payment card industry. Not entirely clear. I can't really remember, but we had a contractor come into the business, and I was asked to sort of support her obtaining a certificate for PCCI.
Was this a project that lasted about 8 to 10 months?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I stayed in the team for around 10 months, I think. And on the project with her, I can't remember exactly how long.
Did it have anything to do with the Horizon system?
Not in terms of Horizon losses, no. Not that I can recall.
Did it have any
It was more
relation?
to do with banking cards.
Okay. I think in January 13, you left that role and became mail conformance manager.
Yeah.
Just briefly, what was the mail conformance manager, and did it have anything to do with Horizon?
No, it had nothing to do with Horizon at all. It was to do with the segregation of mail. There was a contract between Royal Mail and the Post Office to correctly segregate mail into first class, second class, packets, parcels. And the role was to reduce or achieve a better compliance, because there were financial penalties for the business if mail wasn't segregated correctly. So I was involved in driving up compliance for that.
And did you remain in that role until you left in May 16?
Yes, I did, yeah.
In that time, January 13 to May 16, did you have anything to do with the Horizon system?
Nothing at all, no.
So looking at the period of 1995 when you joined the security team until 2012 when you left to go over essentially on this project, and that 17-year period, how would you describe the culture within the security team?
When I joined the security team, it was quite a small team. We were regionalised, and it was a great team to work with. There was a really good people working together. It was good culture, no question about that. I think we became a national team at some point, which again, the culture was always very positive. I was well supported by line management. 2000, and when was it now? I can't remember when Mr. Scott came into the team as the head of security. I think it was around 2008, maybe. Initially it was fine. I remember him delivering a strategy on how the team was going to be taken forward. But the team, there seemed to be a lot of changes from that point on. A lot of senior managers came and left. The team was reduced again. There was a movement from, movement to a hub way of working. So people that were based out wherever they'd been. If they were based out in on the south coast or wherever, the hub for the south was London, and everybody had a requirement to be in London to work, which effectively moved a lot of people out of the role because the travel would just been too much. So they had to find other roles within the business, which, you know, was, I think, difficult for a lot of people. Yeah, the culture changed slightly, but when we moved into head office, it became, personally it didn't affect me, but you knew there were rumblings of people not being very happy within the team. So yeah, I was quite happy to leave when I left.
When I asked you the question about what the culture was like, you said initially it was fine.
Yeah.
And then you went on to talk about something else. What was it like after it ceased to be fine?
Well, it just wasn't a happy team to be in from sort of 2008-9. It wasn't particularly happy.
And was that, and I'm going to divide things into two here, which might not be the only way of doing things, was that about your own working conditions and practices, i.e. the things that affected you as employees of Post Office, salary, job structure, management lines of reporting, distance of travel to work, pay and conditions, those kind of things? Or was it, on the other hand, the substance of what you were being required to do?
Yeah, it was just a feeling of how the team was when it was when we were regionalised, or when we were within South East region. It was more personable. It just seemed to change. The culture of the business seemed to change, in my opinion. So, you know, I was very happy to leave personally.
Do you know how the Post Office Investigation Department was viewed by other parts of the business, including by sub-postmasters?
Well, I'd imagine the Post Office Investigation Department wasn't very popular because of the job we did. I can go back to the days of being an investigator, you know, pre-Horizon. We had a very good relationship with the Sub-Postmasters Federation at that time. You know, they were very supportive of the work we were doing in terms of the pension allowance frauds. They were always invited to interviews and what have you, so, you know, we got on very well. But I don't know how the relationship with the Federation developed after that.
You tell us in your witness statement that after the Post Office separated from Royal Mail Group in about 2011, prosecutions were dealt with by a senior lawyer, Jarnail Singh, and external solicitors.
Yeah.
Did you submit files to Mr. Singh at all?
No, we didn't have case files as financial investigators. We would have submitted, you know, our restraint orders and Section 16 statements for confiscation through Mr. Singh, and we would have sought his approval. We needed authority from senior authorising officer and also, Mr. Singh before we did anything.
And so you did earlier on submit cases on to Mr. Singh and members of the same team as him, the criminal law team. So before you were a financial investigator.
Case files were sent to the criminal law team. As I say, I didn't have any case files when Mr. Singh joined the Post Office. We would submit case files through the criminal law team that were based in Croydon. I think Mr. Singh was part of that team.
Okay, can we move on, please? I'm going to turn to investigation policies, strategies and decisions to prosecute. And to start with your role in relation to Post Office investigations and prosecutions against sub-postmasters. You tell us in your witness statement, and this is paragraph 6, on page 5, no need to turn it up. You say that your role in relation to disciplinary matters was limited to those staff you line managed directly.
That's correct, yeah.
And you don't recall ever having to deal with any disciplinary issues in your time in Post Office?
No.
When you were an investigation manager, you interviewed suspect offenders and were responsible for disclosure in those cases.
Yeah.
Did that role involve gathering information and evidence that might be relevant to a disciplinary proceeding against the sub-postmaster?
Yeah, that would do, yeah. There's the discipline side of sub-postmasters. Yeah, that would be, we would produce a report for that, and that would include reference to any evidence that had been identified in the investigation. And that would be sent to the contract manager for discipline.
You were involved at that time as an investigation manager in disclosure decisions.
Yeah.
You were responsible for processing disclosure as a casework manager.
Yeah.
And as a financial investigator, were you responsible for disclosure?
Yeah.
And in all three functions, did you liaise with members of the criminal law team in relation to your own cases?
Yeah.
Did you liaise with the civil litigation lawyers within the Post Office in each of those three functions?
My involvement with civil litigation from memory was in relation to provision of ARQ data, if I was asked, in my SPOC role as casework manager.
So that was only when you were assistant casework manager and casework manager?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Did you have any involvement in what might be described as litigation strategy or prosecution strategy?
No.
At any point in your career in the Post Office?
No, not at all.
You tell us in terms of policies, procedures, that Post Office's policy in relation to the investigation and prosecution of offenders was the same for all Post Office employees as well as for sub-postmasters, managers and staff.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you tell us about a triggers and timescales document which broadly outlined the types of cases that the team would investigate and the expected timescales for completion.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can we look, please, at poll 0010 5221, please? Can you see that this is described as a document of the security operations team?
I don't have anything on my screen.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Somebody will come and press a button on your screen. It may have gone to sleep. As I said, somebody will come and press a button. Ah, good.
Oh, what is it?
Is that now working?
Yep.
Can you see the triggers and timescales document on the screen?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Is this the type of document you were referring to when you referred to a triggers and timescales document
Yes, it is.
in your witness statement?
Yes, it is, yeah.
And when would this have been operative? In which of your many functions would this have been relevant?
I would say casework, probably 2002, 2004 to 2007.
And who was this addressed to?
I think this was a document put together for the network to make them aware of the cases we dealt with and what the timescales for dealing with them were.
So this was something that came out from the centre, as it were, from the casework management team to the regions?
It's not a document that was put together by casework, I don't think. I think this was put together by Tony Artin.
And what was the purpose of it?
To make people aware of how we dealt with cases and what the timescales or the expectations would be for processing cases.
And if we scroll on through the document, please. And scroll down, please. We can see essentially the steps in the first two columns, and then the time by which that step must be taken in the last column. Is that right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And then if we scroll on, please, then that's depicted in a different way in that infographic there.
Yeah.
And then if we can look, please, at poll 0010 5220. And if we scroll down, please, a little bit, just so we get the heading as well. Thank you. Do you remember this document or the type of information contained on it?
Yeah, I think it's sort of not that familiar now, but yeah, it looks like a document that went with the triggers and timescale.
The other one was more about timeliness and the steps which must be taken within certain timeframes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Whereas this is about raising cases, i.e. what must be investigated, what may be investigated and what need not.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so looking at the first box, loss of any amount, where there hasn't been a suspension, case raise, what does that mean?
Well, it just means
Investigate.
raise a formal case for investigation, yeah.
And so if we fell in that first row there, that need not be or should not be raised for investigation. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And then the second box, if the loss is less than £1,000, same answer. Is that right?
Yes.
Between £1,000 and £5,000, there would seem to have been discretion as to whether or not to raise a case or not for investigation. Is that right?
That's correct.
And it says to be discussed with the contracts team. Who would decide? Well, first of all, who would conduct that discussion with the contracts team?
So if we're talking about audit losses, that would probably be the team leader for the area, I would think. I mean, when audits were reported to the team, the auditors, they may well have a phone number of an investigator just because they've dealt with them previously. So sometimes an auditor would contact an investigator directly. But generally speaking, I would say the team leader would be the one.
And who would make that decision, whether or not within that third row to investigate or not?
I would say it would be a joint decision between the contract manager and the investigator, or the team leader, whoever took the call.
And then scroll down, please. Loss more than £5,000, investigate. Is that right?
That's what that's saying, yeah.
And is that your memory of what the trigger for a certain investigation was, a loss of over £5,000?
I actually thought it was higher than that, but if that's what the document says. I don't know whether there would have been a document following this. Do you know what date this was from?
If we go back to the first page at the top, please. I can check to what document this was, to which document this was an appendix.
All right.
And therefore, I, over the break, I might be able to establish a date.
Because, yeah, I mean, 5K sounds quite low.
Feels low to you?
It does, yeah, but that may well have been the case at that time. Well, it would have been the case at that time, but yeah, I think it might have been increased.
If we just scroll down to the bottom, please. Thank you. It says that this is a guide only. Each loss will be assessed on its own merits and include other factors, admissions, resources, timescales, modus operandi. Yes?
Yes.
The document doesn't list whether there was evidence of dishonesty by the postmaster as a trigger for investigation. It's focused on the loss being the key into whether to investigate or not. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the investigation would determine whether there was dishonesty or not, but yeah, I mean, that's essentially what the document says, yeah.
And was that the approach that was taken over time, that the amount of loss was the determining factor on whether or not there should be an investigation or not?
I wouldn't have said so, no. I mean, if there was clear evidence of dishonesty, then that would have been investigated regardless of the loss. But as I said, the team reduced over time, so we had to be a bit more selective about the cases we could take on. I think when I first joined the team back in the 90s, I think we had somewhere in the region of 90 investigators. There were at least 9 or 10 teams, I think, maybe 8 or 9 teams, maybe 70 or 80 investigators. I'd say it's not clear to me, but by the time I left, we had considerably less. So we had to be more selective on the cases we took.
This does include MO, modus operandi,
Yeah.
as a factor to consider.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking, to your knowledge, was the decision primarily on whether to investigate or not, primarily based on the amount of alleged loss, which the table tends to indicate, or an understanding of what it was alleged that the postmaster had done?
I mean, the table indicates that, I agree. But if there was a clear evidence of dishonesty, I'm sure that we would have raised a case on it, regardless of the loss, whether it was, you know, as long as it was over 5,000 or thereabouts, then a case would have been raised, I'm sure.
Thank you. So it's 20 past now. That might be an appropriate moment for a break. Can we break until 25 to, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, sir. Sir, good morning. Can you continue to see and hear us?
Yes, thank you, yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ward, can we look, please, at poll 0010 4747? If we just look at the foot of the page, please. You'll see there's no date here. Go over the page. And keep going. And keep going. And again. And keep going. And keep going. And keep going, sorry. You'll see that it's consistently not dated at the foot of the page, but that this is a document, stop there, thank you, just scroll up, a document that is said to be effective from March 2000. Do you see that?
Yes.
And at this time, you would have been an investigation manager.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, if we go back to page 1, please. You'll see that it's described as a casework management document, part of investigation policy. And it's addressed to, I think, linked to accountability, security managers. That would include you, yes?
Correct.
And the aim is to ensure that adequate controls are in place to maintain standards throughout investigation processes. So I suspect this is a document you can no longer remember, but would have been something with which you would have been familiar at the time.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you. And if we look at reporting standards in the third box down, and look at the sort of a preamble to what we're going to look at in a moment, some criticism of refusing to disclose investigation reports. Yep, in the first bullet point there. And then if we can go over the page, please, to the second page, and look at the third bullet point. In England and Wales, legal services will decide what information will be disclosed to the defence in compliance with the CPIA 1996. So I've moved over all the parts that are about disciplinary and employment law processes to look at crime. And then the next bullet point down, if during the course of an inquiry, failures in security or operational procedures are identified, which may or may not be directly connected with the offences under investigation, a separate report should be made to the relevant function or line manager in order that remedial action should be taken. In the interest of maintaining good industrial relations and to maintain confidentiality, it's important that individuals are not named in this report and recommendations are made in general terms. The separate report will need to be listed on CSO6D and possibly on E, and legal services will then decide whether such a report should be disclosed to the defence under the CPIA 1996. And then the next bullet point, the issue of dealing with information concerning procedural failures is a difficult one. Some major procedural weaknesses, if they become public knowledge, have the potential to assist others to commit offences against the Post Office, or to undermine the prosecution case, or to bring consignia into disrepute, or harm relations with major customers, unless the offender states he's aware that accounting weaknesses exist and he took advantage of them. It's important not to volunteer that option to the offender during interview. The usual duties of disclosure under the CPIA 1996 still apply. Thank you. That can come down. With that document in mind, can you tell us how you, when you were writing reports as an investigation manager, addressed the issue of what were described there as security procedure failures, operational procedure failures, procedural weaknesses or procedural failings?
So I'm going back probably 22 years since I've probably dealt with a case. So it's very difficult for me to remember any specific cases that I dealt with where there were procedural failings.
Do you think from that?
There obviously would have been some, but I really just cannot remember. There was one case I can remember, sorry, that just come back to me. It was a case involving a recruitment of a counter clerk working at a Crown office. And cutting a long story short, the person that turned up at the branch as a new member of staff wasn't the person that went for an interview. And the only way it was found out was just his misfortune that the person who interviewed him was the branch manager at the office he turned up at. And the procedural failing there was that there was no photograph attached to the documents that were sent to the to the branch manager. So that was a procedural failing, which was highlighted in the report. So any procedural failings that you would come across
When you say it was highlighted in the report, what do you mean by the report?
so the offender report that I would have prepared for that case.
This tended to indicate that needed to be addressed separately in a different document that went to and only went to legal services. Can you remember that being the rule?
So the procedural failing would be in the report that went to legal services, but the procedural failing in the report that went to the discipline manager wouldn't be there.
And why was that? Did you understand what the rationale was for that?
So my understanding of the rationale for that would be that the discipline report would be available to the person being disciplined, which would then mean that you're highlighting a failing that could be communicated to everyone else.
Might that not be relevant to their discipline case?
Well, in the case I dealt with, not really, I don't think, no.
Can you recall a case in which, other than the one you've just mentioned, in which it would be relevant or may be relevant?
Not off the top of my head, no. Sorry.
Okay, in relation to criminal cases, it seems that the documents were not to be sent to, from this policy, the criminal law team, but a report setting out what the procedural weakness or failing was to be sent to the criminal law team. Are you saying that was essentially within the offender report?
Sorry. The
Yes.
procedural failing that was identified within the offender report,
Yes.
it would be in the offender report, yes.
Right, okay. There wasn't a yet third report, a
No,
separate
no.
report. Okay,
No,
that
it
was
would
in
be-
the offender report. Okay.
Yeah.
What was your role as an investigator in ensuring that the post office in such cases complied with its duty of disclosure?
So my role for disclosure would be, it's the investigator's role to disclose everything that would undermine the prosecution, support the defence.
No, you're working, I think, here hypothetically because
Yeah.
you never found a case in which there was anything that undermined the prosecution.
Not that I can recall.
No.
I mean, I'm going back 22 years was the last time I dealt with a case myself, so I'm sure there may have been, but I just can't recall.
Was the limit of the responsibility to make legal services aware of it, or did the investigator perform a separate role of disclosure officer?
My role would have been to have made legal services aware of it. That's my understanding.
Did you ever act as a disclosure officer in any prosecution case?
No, I didn't know.
How many cases of yours, when you were an investigation analyst and an investigation manager, went to prosecution?
I would say 3 or 4.
And is that, so that's between 1995 and 2001?
Yeah. Yeah, because I was first
what-
officer from about 2004. Sorry, I've got my times mixed up, haven't I?
Yeah, you became policy and standards manager.
Yeah, in 2004, sorry.
T-
So, yeah, so
2001,
I
you told
joined,
us earlier.
I joined in 95 as an analyst.
Yeah.
From 97 to 2001, I was an investigation manager.
Yeah.
And in that time, I can think of three that I can remember. There may have been one or two more, but certainly no more than five, I would have thought.
And who acted as the disclosure officer if you did not?
Well, I would have been the disclosure officer as such. So it's my responsibility, but I didn't see myself as a disclosure officer. I know it's my responsibility to disclose everything, but I saw myself as the investigating officer. I appreciate it's a kind of a dual role, but I wouldn't have seen myself as singularly a disclosure officer. But yes, I knew it was my responsibility
Your responsibility to do what?
to disclose everything that was relevant to the case, and if it supported the defence or undermined the prosecution, then it needed to be disclosed.
When you became the assistant and then the casework manager, was it the casework manager's responsibility to ensure that all reasonable lines of inquiry had been exhausted?
No, not that I can recall, no.
You told us earlier that those working in casework might point out anything obvious, like a missing witness statement or a missing exhibit.
Yeah.
Does that describe the extent of casework management's oversight of the quality or the substance of an investigation?
Yeah, as I say, from memory, the team leader would be the one who would have more oversight of the case and the conduct of the case.
Did files have to go through a team leader before they were submitted to casework?
I think so, yeah.
And do you know what function the team leader performed, what checks the team leader performed?
No, I don't know.
When you were an assistant casework manager and a casework manager, who made the decision whether or not a person was to be prosecuted or not?
That would be the lawyer within the criminal law team.
Sorry?
No, the criminal law team would advise on the charges. The decision to prosecute would be down to whoever was the prosecuting authority, which was generally the head of the security team or investigation team, whatever it was at the time.
So who would make the decision to prosecute?
The decision to prosecute, from my recollection, would be whoever the prosecuting authority was at the time. So it could be the head of security. It changed. The prosecuting authority would change in my time in the team.
Did you get to see all the advices that the criminal law team prepared?
They would, yeah, I mean, the criminal law team would put an advice in the case papers that would come back to the casework team.
So the whole file would come back to you
Yeah,
physically
yeah.
with advice added?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
In your witness statement, no need to look at it, it's paragraph 16, you say the case file would be submitted to the by the casework team to the criminal law team, who would prepare an advice and detail any charges based on the evidence. Is that right, that before the file came back to you, they would outline the charges that they suggested be pursued?
Yeah. Or they would come back with an advice for further inquiries to be made and not necessarily make a decision. So,
Did that happen?
yeah, that would happen quite frequently, yeah.
And so we're not making a decision now, further investigatory work needs to be undertaken?
Yes, absolutely. That would happen quite frequently, yeah.
And would you then pass the file back down the chain or along the line to the investigation manager?
Yes.
you carry on in your witness statement, the head of investigations or whoever was the prosecution authority at the time would have sight of the case file and would make the final decision on whether to prosecute or not. Do you know what test or approach the head of head of investigations took when deciding whether to prosecute or not?
No, I don't know.
In casework, did you know what standard had to be achieved before a decision positively to prosecute was made?
No.
Were you aware of the code for Crown prosecutors?
I've heard of it, but I wouldn't know the details of it. That would be, from my perspective, that would be a decision for the criminal law team, or the lawyer in the criminal law team.
Was that a document with which you and the team were familiar at the time, the code for Crown prosecutors?
I wasn't familiar with it, no.
Was any filter applied by the casework team by reference to evidential sufficiency? We're not going to put a case up to the criminal law team and the head of investigations if on our review of the file there's not sufficient evidence.
No, there wasn't, no.
So were you literally post-boxing it?
Essentially, yeah.
And as we said earlier, the compliance didn't address that, evidential sufficiency. The compliance checks didn't address evidential sufficiency. No. Thank you. You tell us in your witness statement that you're not aware of the tests applied by either the criminal law team or the head of investigations in deciding whether to prosecute or not. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so is it right to say that the role played by casework team members in decisions to prosecute was essentially moving files from one place to another?
Yes, I would agree with that, yeah.
Why didn't the investigation team just send the file to the criminal law team?
Yeah. Well, we had to do the compliance and record the details of the case because we had a casework spreadsheet that we were running that we were required to do so that we could, maintain details of the case, where the case is at in terms of decision making. That was essentially it, I think.
So it was about numbers and you called them earlier whether the stickers were in the right place, or I think one of the casework compliance things was whether something was written in the right font and of the right size.
That was part of the compliance, yeah.
It was that kind of thing compliance was aimed at.
Yeah.
Do you know why compliance didn't look at substance?
No, I didn't. I don't know.
Thank you. Can we turn to your role in casework in obtaining data and witness statements from Fujitsu? You tell us over a large passage in your witness statement, it's paragraphs 34 to 54 of your witness statement, your involvement in obtaining ARQ data and analysing it. Yes?
Me analysing it?
Yes, i.e. that you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't, no.
What training did you receive, if any, in the obtaining of data from a computer system for the purposes of disclosure in criminal proceedings?
I didn't have any training at all in that. I was trained how to obtain event and transaction logs within a branch because that was available, I believe, for about a month, and that would just be in the form of a till roll, basically. So,
sorry, sir, the stenographer said something that I didn't hear.
I didn't catch the end of the answer, sorry.
Okay, I think the stenographer didn't catch the end of the last sentence.
to do with the till roll.
Yes, I think that was the one.
So within the branch, you could obtain event and transaction logs. I believe it went back a month, which were quite unwieldy to look through and analyse. But I was shown how to do that. But in terms of the data that was provided by Fujitsu, I didn't receive any formal training at all. It was in the form of an Excel spreadsheet, so and the columns were explained to us what was in each column, and it was all fairly common sense stuff, to be honest.
Had you ever heard of Section 69 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and what it required when you were performing the role of casework manager?
Section 69? No, I don't. Doesn't ring a bell with me, sorry.
Had you ever heard, if not the section and the act, anything about what the law required in criminal proceedings as to the nature and quality of the evidence produced from a computer?
Not that I can recall, no.
When you were performing this role as casework manager from 2002 onwards, as an assistant to start with, were you aware that there had been a law change prior to your taking up the function that was relevant to that issue, or may have been relevant to that issue? If we're getting data from a computer, there's certain things that we have to do alongside that to prove it in a court.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
And that there was a change in the requirements.
No, wasn't aware of that.
Were you aware of any law or evidential requirements concerning the production of computer evidence from 2002 until 2007?
No.
Was that ever the subject of discussion within the casework management team when you were obtaining this data from Fujitsu?
Not that I can recall, no.
We're getting computer data from this person over here, this organisation over there. There are some requirements, evidential requirements, that need to be satisfied if we're going to present it to the Crown Court or the Magistrates' Court. That was not something that was the subject of discussion.
No, not that I can recall, no.
And can you remember the criminal law team ever advising on that issue or being asked to advise on that issue?
In their advices, they might ask for, obtain Horizon data, but there was no advice given on how it should be presented that I can recall.
Can we look, please, at poll 0011 4566? And page 14, please. We can see a document here dated the 6th of January 2003. Maybe if we just skip back to the beginning part of it. If we just go back and then go forward each page, please. And keep going. Yeah, thank you. Just go back. You'll see this is a Fujitsu document, a description for the implementation and maintenance of security policies and procedures. And then if we go to the fourth page, please. And if we see in the third box down there, no, sorry, the third box that was being displayed, Sue Lowther, Post Office Limited, comments on version 2. Sue Lowther was a Post Office employee, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And what function would she have been performing at this time, December 2002?
Looking at the the box below, Post Office Information Security Manager.
And so what relation did she have to you?
I don't recall meeting Sue.
Was she somebody with whom you were familiar?
I was aware of the name, yeah.
So it seems that somebody within the post office knew about this document, namely Miss Lowther.
Yeah.
If we go back to page 14, please. Can you see that ARQ is defined as the in the second definition down? Yes?
Yeah.
And then if we just scroll through, please, and keep going, and keep going, keep going, and keep going, and keep going, and keep going, and keep going. And keep going. Just stop that. Just go up. You'll see there's a section on litigation support. Yes?
Yes.
And then if we keep going. And then stop there. Thank you. This, I've not taken you to individual parts of it to see what it describes, but in general terms, it sets out the relationship between Fujitsu on the one hand and Post Office on the other in the provision of ARQ, some other data as well, but ARQ data and litigation support, and in particular describes some contractual limits in terms of years and months, but also the process that's to be adopted in making requests and the provision of data.
Yes.
Was this a document with which you were familiar when you were performing the function of manager in 2003?
I've certainly seen a document along those lines, yeah. I mean, whether it's this one or not, but yeah, I would have had that document to help me understand the volume of requests. So yeah, I would have been aware of that, yeah.
Thank you. And then FUJ 0012 2366. We can see a document entitled Management for the of the Prosecution Support Service for ARQs, dated the 6th of June 07. And so this is right at the end of your period as a casework manager, is that right?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Just before I think you became an AFI.
Yeah, I found one of the certificates for passing FI. You had to go through various stages of training, and it was dated December. So my guess is that I probably joined around 6 months earlier, because I worked in the team and started training. So I would guess it'd be about that time, yeah.
This seems to be an updated process in mid-2007 relating to the document that we've just looked at, the processes described in that. Do you know what prompted or led to this document being created, this policy being created?
No, I don't know.
Can we just look forward to page 21, please? And scroll down, please. I'm sorry, that's an errant reference. If we go back to the beginning, please. And just scroll forwards, please. And just keep scrolling. Okay, a little faster if that's possible. Yes, there, thank you. You'll see, and this is depicted in words elsewhere in the document, a process described in a graphic in relation to making audit requests,
Yes.
ARQ requests. On the left-hand side, I think non-prosecution cases, and on the right-hand side, prosecution cases. You'll see the steps on the right-hand side. Check Horizon System Help Desk if required, check non-polling reports if required, check appropriate peak logs if required, complete a witness statement of fact, complete exhibit labels, dispatch to Post Office Limited. And then the left-hand side describes what is to be done in the audit request part of the request.
Yep.
Does that describe, admittedly this isn't a document addressed to Post Office Limited, does that describe the nature of the possible forms of information and data the Post Office could seek from Fujitsu?
I would say yes, that's my understanding, yeah.
Were all of them, were each of them requested in each case?
Sorry, prosecution support?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of, no. So, in terms of the process for casework, we would request ARQ data that was asked for.
And just stopping there, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Would, in each proposed prosecution case, you request ARQ data in each case?
No,
Why would you not request ARQ data?
unless it was asked for.
Whose decision was it to ask for it?
So it would be legal services would make the decision on what evidence was required for the case. So if there were admissions in a case, then you wouldn't necessarily need to obtain a witness statement for it.
You mentioned a lot of issues in that last answer there.
Sorry.
You said, firstly, legal services would decide what evidence to ask for.
Yeah.
Legal services only got involved at the point at which a request to prosecute was being made.
Yeah.
Yes? Does it follow that an investigator would not seek ARQ data as part of their investigation?
Yeah, for an audit shortage, yeah, absolutely.
They wouldn't.
They would, yeah.
Okay. What determined whether or not an investigator asked for ARQ data in an audit shortage case?
I would think that for an audit shortage case, they would always request ARQ data
Why would they always request it?
because it would be relevant to the case.
Why would it be relevant to the case?
Because it's an audit, or it's an audit query of all events and transactions that have happened at that office.
Isn't it enough to show that on audit there was a difference between what Horizon showed on the cash account or some other document as being needing to be present in the branch and what the stock take showed was present in the branch?
That would clarify the audit shortage. The ARQ data would help to clarify the person in the office that prepared the balance, that may have undertaken certain transactions. So it would be relevant, I think.
When you say it would be relevant, are you saying it would be necessary?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And it would be necessary in all audit shortage cases.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
And so you would expect to see an ARQ request in each and every audit shortage case.
If there had been admissions, I'm not sure that the investigator would have thought it necessary at that time to request ARQ data.
And why?
I don't know really.
Okay, we'll move on. You said that it was for legal services to decide whether, I think, a witness statement was required. Did I
No.
understand you correctly there or
No,
not?
sorry, that wouldn't be correct. Obviously, if so it's, having not been an investigator for quite a long time, I'm struggling as to the actual process that they would have followed. But my sort of instinct would be that if they had requested audit record query data, so they had the data, they would ask for the witness statement to support it at that time, so that it could be presented to the criminal law team to advise on whether there is, charges to be, or there's evidence for prosecution.
And so your understanding was that if a request for ARQ data was made, it was a necessary corollary of that, a necessary bolt-on to that, that a witness statement had to come with it too.
If it was asked for, yeah. Wouldn't necessarily, I don't know whether, it's difficult to remember, to be honest. Yeah.
Looking at this flow chart, both sides of it, this doesn't mention the message store, does it? If you look at it.
On the left-hand side, audit record query request. It's got generate message store.
So what does that, to your understand, mean? Generate message store?
Sorry, I don't know what it means.
Were you aware of something called the message store?
It doesn't ring a bell with me, no.
Something that had more data on it than was available than simple ARQ data. Were you aware of that?
No.
Were you aware of something called the event log?
Yeah, I mean, that came as part of the ARQ. So the transaction log was all the transactions conducted at the counter. The event log was logging on, logging off, cash declarations and balance results. Probably other things as well, but I know there was two logs that came with an ARQ.
Can we just look, please, remembering this, at poll 0008 1910? And look at pages 4 and 5, please. If we can look at them alongside each other, please. Thank you. If we look on the right-hand side first, you'll see an email from Mr. Dilly, dated Friday the 15th of December, to Anne Chambers, and you're copied in. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Many thanks to you and Andy Dunks for attending court to give evidence this week, which was helpful. Judge has reserved his judgment. Thanks also to Brian and his team for providing information about the Falkirk branch at short notice. And then if we scroll down, in litigation, the parties involved have a continuing obligation pursuant to the court rules. And then skipping over 5 or 6 lines, I was also recently told that there was a message store which had everything else on it. And we invited Mr. Castleton to look at it. He didn't take up the opportunity. Whilst giving evidence, that's Miss Chambers, told the court there was also a different sort of events log not included on the message store that we hadn't seen or disclosed for the Marine Drive branch. Mr. Castleton telephoned me today and asked for a copy of this, scrolling down, to be supplied immediately. And then you can read till the rest of the email. Looking at it generally at the moment, we'll come back to Castleton in a moment. What was your involvement in the Castleton case?
When was this, 2006? So yeah, I would have been casework manager at that time, so I would have been requesting data on behalf of the civil litigation team that were dealing with it.
So you would have been the go-between
Yeah,
between civil litigation to your right, as it were, and then Fujitsu to your left.
exactly, yeah.
Okay. This speaks of, can you see, the message store which had everything else on it. It seems to be speaking about something in addition to the ARQ data that was obtained.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Do you know what that's referring to there?
No, I don't know.
Were you aware of a message store which had, quote, everything else on it?
No, I wasn't, no. All I was aware of for ARQ data was we could request transaction logs, event logs that were relevant to the transactions that were conducted at a post office and the events that happened at a post office. And we could further request Horizon System Help Desk calls.
You had previously been an investigator responsible for disclosure of material in criminal proceedings before this. This is December 2005.
Yeah.
And you're being told, albeit as a copyee on this email, that there is another species of data available in a message store which has been made available to Mr. Castleton. Yes?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Is that knowledge that you took forward when you became, or when you were discharging your role as casework manager in criminal cases?
I haven't picked that up.
What about the different sort of events log, which apparently Miss Chambers had referred to in her evidence? Was that something that you didn't pick up?
Yeah, I didn't pick it up, no, not at all.
And so does it follow that after this time, December 2005, this wasn't something that you took back to casework management to say, hold on, we're processing all these ARQ requests. There's this other species of data that somebody at Fujitsu, Anne Chambers, has mentioned as being important or useful that we're not getting or not asking for.
Yeah. No, I've just not picked it up at all. You know, I don't recall seeing this email. Can we just scroll to the top where it's got my
Yeah,
email
yeah,
address?
So right-hand side, that's it.
Yeah, so I mean, I know it's some of it's
Redacted.
redacted. Sorry, yeah, but it's got grahamc.wa.r. I don't know whether that's relevant or not, but would I have actually got that email? Because my email address within the post office was graham.c.ward. So, you know, obviously I'm not going to remember receiving emails from 2006 anyway. And if I was CC'd in, you know, I'd like to think I would have read it, and if I'd have seen that, then that would have concerned me greatly. And yeah, I would have escalated that as an issue, but I just don't think I've picked that up. And whether that was because I haven't received the email or whether I just haven't picked it up, I don't know.
Can we just go up, please, to page 3? So maybe if we can just display one page at a time now. Thank you, and then just scroll up. You'll see here at the foot of the page that I think your email address is, in a reply to that, displayed as graham.c.ward.
Yeah,
That's the correct.
that is correct, yeah.
And so whether this is a function of the way this has been printed, sometimes
Yeah,
the downloading process, I'm using very inelegant terms here, and the printing process affects the way email addresses appear, or whether somebody made a mistake in the first email we looked at. This second email is the correct email address.
yeah,
And so you would have got the chain.
yeah.
So I think we can probably rule out it didn't come to you.
Okay.
That leaves, I think, that it's not something that you picked up.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I think you'd probably agree, in the light of what you just said, it's quite important, isn't it?
Very.
And again, we don't see it reflected in that table of a couple of years later that I showed you in
Yeah.
section 7 of the policy
Yeah,
as things to look for.
yeah. I would have thought, given that yes, it appears to be really important, that this would have been, escalated by the civil litigation team. They worked closely with the criminal law team as well. I would have thought it would have been escalated as as an issue.
And are you talking about Mandy Talbot there?
Well, Stephen Dilly was the lawyer dealing with it.
Yes, he was in an outsourced firm.
Yeah.
So he wasn't within Post Office.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, I would agree it's significant, and yeah, it should have been escalated.
We also know about a note that Anne Chambers herself wrote, which is along the same lines, up into her line management reflections document, which picks up this point about the categories of data obtained as a result of the initial request for data. Can you recall any fallout from that coming back to Post Office saying, when you ask for data, you need to be asking for message store data too?
No, not at all.
Thank you. That can come down, thank you. You tell us in your witness statement that the casework manager acted as the single point of contact, as between the Post Office on the one hand and Fujitsu on the other, in relation for requests for and then the provision of ARQ data.
That's correct. Yeah.
Other than the two documents that I've shown you, the 2003 and the 2007 document, which are Fujitsu documents, were there any written policies or protocols which you in the Post Office followed within the casework team concerning requesting ARQ data?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did you just do, therefore, what your predecessor had done, follow the custom and practice of him or her?
Yeah, I think I inherited the process. I can't be absolutely clear because I say it goes back, 22 years. But yeah, we just basically carried on requesting the data that we thought was important.
You were aware, and I think you remember because it's in your witness statement, contractual limits on the number of ARQ requests you could make to Fujitsu without a separate charge.
Yeah.
And you recall maintaining a spreadsheet, the purpose of which was to ensure that the Post Office did not exceed these limits. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And you tell us in your witness statement that the number of requests made by Post Office was monitored very closely.
Yeah.
Why was it monitored very closely?
Well, to ensure that we, where we could, not exceed the contractual limits, because there were financial penalties, unfortunately. I will say at this point that I never quite understood why there were such restrictions on the data coming over to us, why we had a contract with Fujitsu, and I understand Fujitsu managed the system, but it was Post Office data. So it always struck me as odd that we had restrictions on it, but that was the contract.
Did you grumble about that?
Yeah, I did. I did. And I think there was, my line manager at the time was Tony Uttin, and we had issues staying within the limits. We didn't refuse many at all. I mean, we always were there or thereabouts. But I did make the point to him, we had a lot of requests coming from the benefit agency, as they were known then, because of the pension allowance cases that we were dealing with Fujitsu. When they heard that the evidence that came from Fujitsu included times of transactions, which was really, really, really helpful, they started making lots of requests for ARQ data. And at that point, I said to Mr. Utting that, we're going to have problems here. And I know he escalated it. And
Who Tony Utting did?
Tony Utting escalated it within the business, that the limits were restrictive. And I know that it was increased at some point. I can't remember the details, but I know there was some clause in the contract where we could ask for further ARQ numbers, and it was increased, but I couldn't tell you the details of, what it went from and to.
So this was when you were casework manager, you recall discussing the limitations placed by the contract with your line manager, Tony Utting.
Yes.
Why was there a need to raise it with him?
Well, any changes to the contract, from my understanding, were going to mean money, and it was raised at the level that he worked at. It wasn't at my level.
It's my poor question. Why was there a need to raise the issue of the availability of ARQ requests with him? Because you needed more than the contract permitted, presumably.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You tell us in your witness statement, no need to turn it up, it's paragraph 49, that the contractual limits on ARQ requests were the main consideration that informed the Post Office's decision whether to request ARQ data or not. Mm-hmm. Ought the main consideration to have been whether or not the ARQ data was necessary for the purposes of an investigation?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. You tell us in your witness statement that the contractual limits on ARQ data were the main consideration that informed the decision whether to ask for ARQ data or not. Mm. Ought the main consideration instead have been whether or not the data was necessary for the purposes of an individual case?
Yeah, I would agree.
So why was the contractual limit the main consideration?
Yeah, it's not very well worded, I would say. For me, it was, as casework manager, I would want to be able to provide Horizon data whenever it was asked for. So increasing the contractual limits was, necessary. That was as far as I got involved in it, really.
Did the knowledge about the contractual limits and the additional financial penalties that might be placed on Pole if more requests than were permitted were made trickle down to investigators?
I I wouldn't have thought so, no. I certainly wouldn't have communicated it.
So they might know that if the post office had reached its allocation for the month or the year, it was going to cost post office money to ask for data.
It may have trickled down. Yeah, it may have trickled down. I mean,
Was there ever any discussion between the casework team and investigators about whether it was necessary, truly necessary, to seek ARQ data or not?
no, not insofar as don't request it. We might have asked them to really consider the scope, because for me, you want as much Horizon data as you could possibly have, but sometimes you would just ask for a couple of months when you might want 6. So it was restrictive. There's no question about that.
So you wouldn't go as far as saying don't ask or don't bother asking,
No,
but you might encourage them to limit the range of their request.
absolutely. I mean, in the early days, we were always quite close to our limit. When the contract was increased, we had a lot more scope. So I don't recall, towards the end of my time in casework, having to worry about the contractual limit.
You tell us in your witness statement that where a postmaster was attributing an alleged shortfall to Horizon, you would have assumed that the investigation manager investigating that shortfall would have requested Horizon data in every case, essentially.
Yeah, I would have thought so, yeah.
And why would you assume that such an investigation manager in every case would ask for Horizon data?
Well, just because it could be used evidentially.
To do what? To prove or to disprove what the
Yeah,
sub-postmaster was saying?
yeah. I mean, it's there could be transactions or things happening on the ARQ data that could be relevant.
Was there any system of prioritisation of ARQ requests coming from the security team over other requests?
I would prioritise security team personally. Yeah, absolutely. Over.
Where were the other
So the
requests
other
coming from?
Sorry. The other requests would come from contract managers, not field support, but whoever it was that was investigating any issues at offices. There were various teams that were involved in supporting branches, and I presume that everybody within the business was aware of the ARQ process. So, yeah, we would get, not many, but you would get ad hoc requests from other areas of the business. And as I say, I don't recall having to say, no, you can't have it. It was certainly an issue in the early days, but latterly it wasn't.
What kinds of ARQ requests would postmasters and contract managers make?
Just per individual transactions, where they thought they had an issue, or if a transaction correction had been received at the office and the sub-postmaster wanted to dispute that transaction correction, ARQ data would be requested.
Why did you prioritise security team requests over those made by sub-postmasters and contract managers?
Well, just because of the numbers.
But why were they more important than the sub-postmasters?
It's a good question. They're not more important. I mean,
Why were they prioritised?
they were prioritised because we may have needed them for prosecution cases.
Why was it more important to service the requirements of somebody who had as their function prosecution over a sub-postmaster that may be querying or disputing a transaction?
Well, I guess it wouldn't be really, but as I
Why
say,
was it?
I don't recall refusing requests at all.
That's a different issue.
But we would have prioritised. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I haven't got an answer for that. I'm sorry.
Was it because it was thought more important to prosecute sub-postmasters than anything else?
No, I don't think so. Not from my perspective.
Why were security team requests prioritised?
Well, without the Horizon data, we wouldn't have potentially been able to continue with an investigation.
Can we look, please, at poll 0011 4566? And pages 31 and 32, please. And if we can display 31 and 32 at the same time, please. (31 and 32 at the same time). Thank you. If we look on the right-hand side and scroll down, please. And look at your email first at the foot of the page. Now scroll a bit further. On the right-hand side. Your email of the 22nd of July 2004 to Mr. Arting, Horizon data requests. Yeah?
Yeah.
This year we've submitted the following. And you set out the monthly figures for the, I think, 8 months that have then elapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Total 330 our annual limit. Can you see that?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Were you saying by that you'd reached your annual limit
That would appear to be the case, yeah.
by August?
Yeah.
And if we just scroll on a little further on the right-hand side. Give me a moment. If we can scroll up on the left-hand side, please. Maybe let's just display this as one document rather than trying to be flash and display two at the same time. Thank you.
Right.
And then scroll down. Yes, it does just begin. Predicting. I was unsure whether we were missing some text because you didn't start the sentence with a capital P. Predicting how many we will want isn't straightforward. As people in our own team, retail line managers, the MBSC legal services, are aware of the problems and restrictions in obtaining these logs and thus don't bother asking for them. Just on that sentence, that does tend to indicate a bit of trickle down, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Looking at that sentence now, do you think, in fact, there had been some trickle down? Because people on the ground who were conducting the investigations knew about the contractual restrictions on the provision of ARQ data, they didn't bother asking for them?
Yeah, I would have to agree, yeah.
If we had greater access, I'm sure once the word got around, we'd use up whatever was available. With a monthly limit of 46, I didn't have to turn any away. You say that in your witness statement, you said that today. So I would guess that having 50 per month for the rest of this year would see us through until the contract's amended. Therefore, my guesstimate for the remaining year would be 220, and you explain why. Essentially, you were saying that because of the arrangements that had been agreed as a matter of contract between the Post Office and Fujitsu, people in other teams, including security, weren't asking for ARQ data because they knew it wouldn't be given.
Yeah, that's why we raised it as a real issue. And that's thankfully why we got the limits increased, as I said.
And so you saw the position needed to be put right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was not just by increasing the limit, but by also encouraging people to ask for data whenever they wanted it. Is that right?
No, I wasn't encouraging people to ask for it whenever they wanted it, but I wanted to be able to provide data when people asked for it.
Was anything done to correct the attitude of mind that's described in the first paragraph there? Investigators and others not asking for it, don't bother asking because of knowledge of restrictions.
Not that I can recall, no.
Can we go on to page 37 and 38? Start on 38, please. So from Tony Utting, and then scroll up, please. And keep going. And keep going. And keep going. Can we see at the top here Mr. Utting forwarding this chain to you and others
Yeah.
in June 2004?
Yeah.
There are reams of emails about this, as you can imagine. Let's just look at what this part of the ream said. If we scroll down, keep going, and keep going, and keep going. There. Mr. Utting is forwarding you an email in which he says, I've spoken today with Keith Baines, the client manager for Fujitsu, who tells me that the proposed reduction in requests has been agreed at EC level, I think that might be executive committee level, and that the business is aware that should we exceed the number of requests in the contract, further resources will have to be found by the business to pay for them. The rationale behind the decision was that it was felt we should not pay for anything in the contract we didn't use, and there was no certainty we would reach the previously agreed numbers. Do you read this as suggesting that there had in fact been a previous reduction in numbers through a fear that capacity would not be used up?
Yeah, that's how it reads, but that wouldn't have been my recollection at all, because we'd always, the time I was doing it, we'd always got very, very close to the limits, and, you know, that's why it was increased.
So if we scroll up, please. We can see David Miller. Can you remember who he was at this point?
Yeah, I think he was one of the senior directors, was he?
An email to him from Mr. Marsh. This refers to the reduction without any prior reference to anyone in my team of the number of prepaid audit and investigation information requests agreed in the contract from 500 to 330. Remember, that 330 number is the number that you had said in your email that we just looked at was the limit for the year. Were you aware of a previous reduction from 500 to 330?
No, I wasn't, no.
I previously agreed with Mike Hannon that our original figure of 750 itself reduced from a rather comfortable 1,000 could be reduced to 500, provided that our bid for funding to cover any additional requests would be met. Were you aware of any of those steps? An original comfortable 1,000 a year, itself reduced to 750, itself reduced to 500, itself reduced to 330?
No, I wasn't aware, no.
When you were the casework manager, the single point of contact for making these requests, did you always work on the basis that your annual limit was 330?
Not always, no. I mean, it was increased to was it 720? I think it went up quite considerably.
With the introduction of banking and the proposal to remove hard copy cash account facility, every investigation, whether full or preliminary, may require access to data held by Fujitsu. I was surprised that such a change was made without any reference to the primary stakeholder. Providing I have your commitment that the Post Office will meet any additional costs which may be caused as a result of this decision, I'm comfortable if this has contributed to the reduction in the overall Fujitsu contract costs. Were you included in any of this prior discussion?
Not that I can recall, no. I mean, it's way above my pay grade.
Did you hear about the fallout from it, i.e. a decision seemingly having been made without your line manager or his line manager, Mr. Marsh, being included in the discussion?
No, I don't recall.
If we go up, please. Stop there. He's forwarding you, Mr. Utting, this chain. What was the purpose of that? Do you know? Is it simply to tell you, look, this has been going on at the higher levels of the organisation?
Yeah.
We just deal with the consequences, kind of thing.
Yeah, it would appear so, yeah.
Thank you. Can we move on, please, to page 44 of this bundle? If we scroll down, please. Thank you. We can see an email of the 1st of June 2004 from you to Keith Baines, copied to Dave Pardo and Mr. Utting.
Yes.
At this time, mid-2004, what role was Mr. Baines performing?
He must have been a Fujitsu relationship manager or something along those lines. I really don't remember.
Was he a senior person
Yeah, well,
within the Post Office?
from my understanding, yeah, he was. Yeah.
You say, please see the email from Bill Mitchell, Fujitsu security manager. Some of the transaction log requests we've submitted have been returned incomplete due to human error on their part. This could invite some criticism for Defence Counsel in cases where the logs have been used in evidence. Fujitsu are submitting complete data with a supporting statement, so hopefully the issue will not be a great problem. Forwarded for information and action you deem appropriate from a commercial and contractual perspective. Can you recall what the issue was with incomplete transaction and event logs that you're describing here?
No, without reference to the email chain that I was sent.
If we go down, I think we'll see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have remembered any of this at all.
If we just keep going. That's the email from Bill Mitchell.
Yeah.
In summary, does this help? In evidence that had been submitted in court proceedings, had incomplete ARQ data been provided by Fujitsu?
Yeah.
Just going back up, you were telling Keith Baines about this. Was he somebody you liaised with often?
No.
Why were you bringing in Mr. Baines?
Well, I presume because he managed the relationship with Fujitsu, so he needed to be made aware of what had happened.
Do you know whether anyone else within senior management, i.e. at his level, was informed about the failure to provide complete ARQ data?
Yeah, I'm not aware of what level of seniority Keith Baines was at. That he might have been the same level as Tony Utting, I don't know.
You say that Fujitsu, are submitting complete data with a supporting statement, so hopefully the issue would not be a great problem. Can you recall whether any action was taken in relation to past cases to check whether what had occurred here, the submission of incomplete ARQ data, had afflicted them too?
No. I mean, I think this was raised by Fujitsu. I think they brought it to our attention, so they had obviously made a mistake. So, no, I don't recall that there was any further action taken.
Can you recall whether there was any review undertaken of cases in which a conviction had been obtained, whether by plea or after a trial, in which ARQ data had featured to see whether, before this time, mid-2004, the ARQ data was complete?
I can't recall, no.
This email is within a folder, a physical folder, which has got on its front sheet information. If we go to page 1 of this, you'll see it. ARQ requests increase in limits.
Right.
Do you know what the relationship was, the connection was between the failure to provide complete ARQ data and the increase in limits of ARQ data?
No idea at all, no.
So we're about to move to a new topic. It is just coming up to 5 to 1 now. I wonder whether you will consider adjourning until 5 to 2.
Yeah, I'd even consider adjourning till 2, unless you tell me those 5 minutes are crucial. Mr.
Well,
Beard.
5 minutes lost now is 5 minutes at the end of the day, sir.
All right, 5 to 2.
Thank you, sir.